Welcome, everyone. Today's episode of Better Teaching is another installment of a conversation with Zach Groshell, something we call Thinking Out Loud, where we discuss topics involved in the implementation of instructional coaching and all things instructional coaching. Zach, most of you know, is the author of the new book, Just Tell Them, which is available wherever you buy your books. He's also the popular podcast host of Progressively Incorrect, and many people know him for his social media presence on X, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn. It's my pleasure to talk to him today to have this discussion about the pros and cons of different types of coaching models that schools might use as they work to support their teachers. I think you're going to enjoy this one. So, today we're going to be thinking out loud about pros and cons of various coaching models. And one of the things that people who listen to your podcast and some of the folks who listen to my podcast know that we are influenced quite a bit by the Brits, what's going on in the UK. And I think you're way more familiar with what's going on in the UK with respect to their coaching models. In fact, it seems like every podcast episode I've ever listened to, that when you're interviewed from somebody from Great Britain, you have to start out by saying, this may seem foreign to you, but we actually have instructional coaches that are full-time positions. So how is it different? What are they doing over there?
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, and I know this intimately as an employee, as the director of Step Lab USA, which is a British based company, but now that's everywhere, that our instructional coach as a full-time role as instructional coach type of role, that is non-existent in England. That largely, if you're going to talk about coaching, we have to think about how are the administrators taking on coaching responsibilities, how are perhaps heads of department getting an hour or two or maybe a halftime role where they can coach and teach. And even a lot of the administrators have a teaching load. Their head teachers or their assistant head teachers and so on, they teach one lesson. And so you've got that where definitely it's a little bit messier, maybe I could say, than it would be with the full-time instructional coach. But that's what we're here for, to kind of thinking through the pros and cons of these different models. And maybe we kind of come to what's ideal if there was infinite money and time and you could design it from the ground up, what would we prefer? So I'm excited to talk about this with you today.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you, I have worked with school districts where this was a secondary level, and what they decided that they were going to do, they wanted to do instructional coaching. And why did they want to do instructional coaching? Because somebody said instructional coaching is the best PD. They had no idea what they were going to do, but how they started was from every department at every secondary school, and it's a fairly large district, they chose one teacher, and they seemed to be, what they told me was the best teacher or a very well respected teacher, because it's very difficult to say, who's the best teacher. And they were going to be the coach for their department. And, like most schools, they got one prep per day. But in order to coach the rest of their folks, they gave them a second prep. So the idea was that these teachers would coach in that extra period the other folks in their department.
There you go. So this was where we can maybe start seeing a continuum, I think, of instructional coaching, where the only person coaching besides people doing it informally is a teacher who has just a single prep, a single hour. I even just heard from someone today who said that the superintendent told the district that they were going to have the literacy coach every Friday, right? Just every
Yeah.
Friday, you're going to see a little bit of an uptick in instructional coaching from our one person we've assigned on Fridays to do this. Pros and cons. What do you think about this?
Well, the first thing was there's an assumption that the best teacher is going to be the best coach. And there are levels of knowledge about teaching And like I always said, when I was an administrator, gosh, if I'm the best teacher on this staff, I'm going to be disappointed because there are people who are great teachers and just they're great with kids, but they're just not going to be good coaches. So that's one thing. The other thing is if I have a full teaching load, I mean, look at we think in the United States, well, gosh, you only have to teach 4 classes. I mean, that's a full teaching load. And now I've got my 4 classes, and now I'm going to have to go support all the teachers in my department. Where's my head? I mean, my head is in my primary responsibility, which is my classes. And it's almost like, well, if I have time, I'll get to them. And then the other problem, the logistical problem, is how do you get to all those folks in that one period? What if they have a prep period? What if they're not doing, there are all sorts of logistical problems people don't think of because they want to save a couple bucks because they don't want to have an instructional coach.
Well, yeah, with especially I'm thinking about the prep piece. Kids demand that you teach your best. That the fact that you have 30 kids sitting there and expecting an experience, and if it doesn't go off well, you have to deal with the repercussions. That is a lot of incentive to focus on that, right? You don't want to come in and mess up a kid's day. You don't want them to misbehave because the lesson isn't well designed and perky pace and so on. What
Yeah.
about the coaching responsibilities? What is the right? There wasn't coaching before, things happened, right? The teachers aren't going to demand the same level of, consistent, predictable support as kids will in a 1 hour period. So that's the first thing to go. I mean, I've experienced that myself where I had to balance instructional coaching responsibilities with intervention responsibilities. I've got 3 intervention periods and 3 coaching periods. I'm not going to let those 3 intervention periods go to waste because
Right.
right, but it's easier. Right, easier to let the coaching go by the wayside. What was the logistical concerns? Now we're talking about 6th period. So end of the day, you're already going to have a subset of the teachers who have planning, who don't teach that period. You can't observe. Some of them are planning, so you can meet with them, but you can't observe their lesson. And some of the teachers are not probably high priority to coach anyway. The whatever a specialist teacher, so you're already kind of limited there in that concern. So yeah, what do you mean spend an extra buck? That's what I mean.
Well, what if you take a what this district did, and there were a couple districts that I worked in that did this exact same thing. If you hire a coach full time, you know what the salary is. If you take a teacher and you reduce their workload, you know, to 5/6 or 4/6, I mean, you're still paying. You think you're saving money because you're only paying 1/6 of that salary, or however 1/5, whatever the calculation is, versus paying a full salary. But you're paying it over all these different departments, and again, you're having all of these logistical problems. So I think a big reason that folks went to that is because they think, well, the teachers will respect this coach more for their content knowledge. They're in the school. Uh, they're going to be available at meetings. But the big thing is they don't understand what it takes to coach a teacher, or to coach effectively when the administration develops these plans. It's one of those things that seems like a good idea until you do it. And
Until you do it. I just met with someone who was given this part-time role. I said it was on Friday, and she told them she didn't want to do it anymore. She didn't feel successful with it. She didn't she wasn't properly trained in coaching. She didn't have enough time. It was too much time between sessions, too many teachers to deal with. So I mean, if I was coaching her to make the most of that Friday, I bet we could find some successes. But for giving it to her like that, it was an unfair and unreasonable, perhaps, expectation that she's going to really move the needle on anything.
yeah,
Yeah. So, what other models are there? So, we've got this kind of we got that out of the way. We've got this coach schools just try to do a coaching patch, give a teacher a great, effective, nice teacher a like an hour off that they are supposed to do for coaching. What else we got?
Well, where we have, like, let's stick with the secondary example. You might have a one teacher as a specialist for the department. You may have somebody who coaches math, and that person may be beyond one building. It depends on the size of the district, but they're kind of a subject specialist plus a coach. And another model would be just a coach who coaches all the subjects.
What are your thoughts on those? Yeah.
Well, the I think that we have to take a look at supporting teachers in just the same way we take a look at supporting students. We take a look at like an MTSS model, you know, and there are teachers who need certain things. There are teachers who need more support. There are teachers who need less support. So in order to provide coaching to all the teachers, we need to know what's needed for everybody. So for example, it may be that I don't, as a coach, I may not be a math expert, but I know who the math expert is that we can that we can tap on the shoulder. And Zach might be that top math guy. And I'm not going to pretend, if that's not my content area, I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to teach you math, but I can hook you up. I can hook you up with somebody, which is like part of the MTSS. We're going to find the support you need. That was a little bit of rambling. Did that make any sense, Zach?
It totally makes sense now that so one of the things I've been doing on the side is working on with this tech platform that's developing instruction. And uh you have people that know the technology very intimately. They know how to design and use technology. They're coders, right? They're tech folks. What they do is in concert, in collaboration with instructional designers, experts of instruction, they create this instruction together. But even then, there is the need to look towards subject matter experts. Because as I'm working with this tech person to design a history video, I can tell you, you need to give more examples. You need to give non examples. You need to scaffold. This is too fast paced. There's not enough questions. But I can't tell you, like, necessarily, like, how history is best taught, the sort of the epistemology of history. Like, how do we situate the learner in place and time? What are sort of the so-called critical thinking skills that are involved with thinking historically, even though these are kind of vague terms? What do historians do? And so what do we do as teachers to design a video that would get the kids to be looking at the content in a way that a historian would, and so on? So in the tech world, we're using these kind of consultants and side pieces to design something that will work for the user. Maybe we need to think about coaching in the same way, that we're not going to have a single individual who's a subject matter expert in 7 subjects and is an instructional expert and is also perhaps the best teacher of all time. These are all different skill sets. We have to have somebody who can maybe manage this and draw from the resources and be someone who thinks in an MTSS type of model where what can I do that's preventative versus what can I do to be responsive and so on. I totally agree with that. People come to me saying basically coaching doesn't even can't even happen because of the subject specificity of especially upper grade subjects, and I just don't buy that.
Oh, I don't at all either. And I think once they've been through our training, Zach, they see that it is possible. But I just think that it's just an example of something that's just not known. That's just not, how many times you're out, working with a school and they say, "Oh, I wish we'd have learned this in our pre programs," but we don't. But so I wanted to expand on the coaching model a little bit. because I want to get to some models that I think that actually work better. All right. And so one of them is to have is that the coaches, there's coordination within the district of coaches. So for example, let's say we're working in a district and they have 10 instructional coaches. One of the main issues that we talked about with the first model was logistics. How can I as a coach have access to a teacher? How can we relieve that teacher of the teaching pressure while we are coaching? Or how can we, as much as we can, match their schedule, with the coaching schedule? And I think one of the things that is underutilized is telling a teacher, you know what, that we have 8 coaches in this district. You tell me when we can meet, and I'm going to have a coach cover your class. And so what do we have? We freed up that teacher with not a sub who they don't know. This is one of the good ones. This is a competent teacher. So they can cover the class. They can actually teach the lesson that they had in mind. And what does it do for the coach? In the eyes of the staff, it's like, no, this coach is still in the classroom. This coach is still doing, because that's one of the issues that teachers think, oh, they're not in the classroom anymore. They don't know what's going on. So you're solving a couple issues by just using these multiple coaches from multiple sites that and quotes multiple sites, but they're district coaches. So it just helps that's one thing that could help the logistics.
Interesting. I mean, do, does the coach need to be in the classroom themselves to be grounded and to have the credibility? That's the two things you just alluded to, right? The credibility is shot when you leave the classroom, which we both have, so I guess nobody's going to listen to us. and the other one and the other one is that being in the classroom teaches you a lot about teaching, or it makes you not forget and empathize with the learner, with other teachers, realizing like that it really is a lot of busy work and there's a lot of different initiatives coming at teachers, and when you're in that position, you realize really what one can handle because you have to shoulder some of that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have to do that one period a day or whatever?
No, I think I think what I described was for the benefit of the whole coaching system, so that because you can't ask teachers to take on one more thing. You can't ask teachers to teach their load, and now you're going to have to come on your own time to do this coaching. No, 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 no. That's not going to happen. It's just going to create bad feelings, and legitimately. I mean, gosh, you're supposed to help me, but you're doubling my work. You're not doubling, but you're making me work a lot harder. The other benefit for the teacher, for the coach who goes and covers the class, they may have something that they wanted to try out. Maybe they wanted to get better. Maybe they had a different take on their turn and talk and they wanted to try it out. So there are things that they can try out. But with respect to getting better as a teacher, I can't think of anything uh, better than to go observe 6 lessons in a day. Man, you can learn a lot. Why? When you're in the moment teaching, your focus is on those kids. Your focus isn't on how am I going to coach somebody to be better. But if I can just be an observer and be a coach, observing that lesson as a coach, I'm going to learn a lot to help other teachers. And the other thing is that if I'm one of those 8 coaches in that district and I observe 6 lessons that day, and you're another one of those coaches and you observe 6 lessons, and we talk at the end of the day, there's a multiplier effect of how many lessons we could see. What did we learn? What are we seeing the same? How are we going to deal with this? What suggestions? There is so much synergy that is lost if we just put a teacher, a coach, one coach at one site in a silo. So I think that's a good model. Multiple coaches coordinating. They have a PLC. they even have a an informal debrief at the end of the day. What'd you see today? What'd you do? What that, how was the debrief? What'd that teacher tell you? How did you handle that? All of those types of things that we don't have to wait for a monthly PLC as coaches. We can do it every day and get better every day.
Yeah, that's interesting about the PLC. And everything that I end up coming back to always means people need to work together and coordinate better. And, sometimes there's not enough time or people don't want to make that time or, but when it comes to instruction, especially like the idea that it's impossible to create these MTSS groups or to have a full MTSS kind of system because X, Y, and Z. It always comes down to the school doesn't have sort of a whole wraparound, comprehensive approach to how they do intervention. And it seems like the same thing with coaching. Okay, what other what other models? Because I know of another one that is increasingly popular. It sounds interesting. I even visited a school that is doing this, and from what I could tell, doing it effectively. And that is this everybody is a coach model, where every teacher teaches a full load, except somebody, probably administrator, takes over their lessons and there's a schedule somewhere. It's a little complex. And teachers can do drop ins to each other's classes, and then they meet up, and then they have a very brief, kind of usually positive type of interaction that is, we could call instructional coaching. I mean, have you seen this? What are your thoughts on it?
The joke, you say weed, you have a frog in your pocket, because I wouldn't call that effective. I would call that, tip time, which is not bad, but unless there's a more of a coordinated type of, I don't even want, I hate to use terms, but lesson study where, we've met, we're teaching similar lessons. Okay, I'm going to go watch my third grade colleagues, and we've all talked about a similar lesson that we're going to plan, and then we're going to teach, and then we're going to see each other. Now it's more structured. Then I could, I'm getting to the point where I might start to call that in instructional coaching. Almost even then, that hurts my feelings saying that. I would say it's more like PLC stuff. It's that peer thing. And the reason that I don't want to call it coaching per se is that I could go into Zach's classroom and watch him and say, hey man, hey Zach, here's a tip. Giving a tip is different than coaching. So that's, I'm not saying that teachers don't won't get better, and I wouldn't say stop doing it if it works, but I'm just saying, that there may be ways to make that even meatier, and to make that time even more effective.
Oh, right. I mean, maybe I should just say what I think is effective coaching, and why it just seems so difficult to even call this coaching. Like you said, tip time. You said that it's sort of, you have a walk-through culture, a drop-in culture, right? Open door culture. And it's formalized through like a chart or a Excel spreadsheet that administrators support, right? I think just lesson study, great. For me, effective instructional coaching means observing lessons and in dialogue with the teacher, naming what was effective, spotlighting that success, and from there, agreeing on a next granular step that is something that they can work on. And following that with a bit of modeling and rehearsal of some sort, right? Whether or not that's sitting side by side and planning it together, or whether that's showing a video, or whether that's just demonstrating what you personally do and then both going back and forth and trying it out. For me,
Yeah.
the only, it's hard for me to see that happening in a really consistent and systematic way with 40 different individuals doing this on a very rare basis. I don't know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think all of those things that you talked about doing that were included in the modeling and the granular stuff, another piece of that is utilizing the talent of the school and bringing, let's go see Miss Smith do this. She's an expert at this. And so that, again, we're developing these professional, collegial relationships, developing a culture, because there's just a plethora of talent, out there that if we cultivate it. But I just don't want to call it coaching. You know, it could be that. as you described, the coaches are managing this. Let's get you in here. We're going to sit side by side. We're going to watch this teacher do this strategy. I don't even have to tell her I'm coming because she does it all the time. It's just part of who she is. And then we'll sit in the back and we'll talk about why it's effective, what she's doing. And
Okay, so you alluded to another type of coaching that's also become popular. And I don't know how much I mean, it's in use, but the idea of it has been discussed a lot recently. And this is what people are calling group coaching. And the lines between a PLC and a presentation and instructional coaching are very blurred here. But the idea is I'm an instructional coach. I'm going around one by one giving personalized PD. It's the same thing that's in the classroom. That's the problem. If I go one by one and give every kid individualized feedback, sometimes it might be better to step back and give everybody the feedback because I don't have to have 35-minute conversations. I can have one 5-minute conversation. So you get people together in a sort of a systematic way of some sort, and you get them together and you kind of do a group coaching session on a regular basis with a few individuals that maybe are working on similar stuff. Thoughts on that?
well, it's now we're moving from the individual coaching, that one-on-one PD. But like you say, there are a lot of similar issues. Even though those classroom doors are closed, there's a lot of similar issues. And there's no reason that a coach, having seen all the classrooms, having that's part of their job, knowing what's going on in every classroom, to step back and either at a PLC or at a staff meeting, PD. Because one of the main complaints of teachers about PD is it has nothing to do with them. Well, guess what? I just collected data from every teacher in this school, and 95 this applies to 95% of the teachers. And the 5% that it doesn't apply to, I'm going to use them as the good examples during the PD that I do. And like you said, if it's 5 minutes, I'm not going to make them sit on their butt for an hour just because I have an hour. We're going to talk about this in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We might even practice it as a group. So the coaching expands beyond the one-on-one, and I think it includes those group, where you have common things occurring based on observations. And again, it could be PLC, it could be PD, and that would still, I see that as part of the coach's responsibility. And we could put some air quotes around that as their coaching.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at is something we've talked about in the past, which is that coaches and the administrators that oversee coaches need to see all of these type of formats, like a group coaching format, a PLC format, a lesson study, a one-on-one coaching cycle. They need to see this as part of a larger system, like that all of these pieces are interacting with each other, and that you collect data in person that can inform what the PLC work is, or that can inform what the presentation is. Oftentimes, presentations are used just because they're extremely efficient at getting out information. So we see that 95%. Let's put together this presentation. It's responsive. It's happening right when we need to. And then what does that do? It triggers all these other interactions. It makes it so that the coaches need to meet with certain people more often. It means we need to have certain departments shoulder the load of doing readings and having discussions around certain things, right? So I I sometimes wonder if in coaching often getting a bad name or a bad reputation or a certain format of PD being seen as better than another, if we've got that all wrong, and that these are all interacting pieces. Sure, some schools are going to choose to emphasize some of them more than others because they believe in them more, or that's part of their ethos, but we can't see them as isolated things. We can't see the coach as a single individual who's on their own to fix up instruction while the administrators do other things, and hopefully the coach can kind of figure it out because everybody is affected by all of these decisions that we're making.
Well, and the role of the principal, let's get back, let's use the analogy of the MTSS again. The principal does not need to be the best coach in the system. He's the person that works on the system. Now, what can an administrator do? Listen to the needs of the coach, listen to the needs of the teachers, and supply resources to be able to do these things. So maybe we want to do something where we do need two subs in today, or we do. The coach can't authorize that. Coach can't do that. That the principal needs to do that. So they're working on the system as well. And the coach, in my opinion, needs to walk around in classrooms with the principal and calibrate what they're seeing, because that's going to be the best PD that administrator may have. And which I think gets me to another role, another thing we haven't talked about yet. And that is, what did these outside consultants do when they come in as a coach?
Well, look,
What's
yeah. What did you just say? You just said that a bunch of adults need to get their act together and start talking to each other and thinking about this in a much more sophisticated way. Let me tell you, that is often not the case in many schools. And the ability for, sure, we have some really talented leaders who come in and they can convince and they can persuade and they can get this happening. The force of their personality and their transformative leadership, so to speak, can make that happen if they have that vision from the get-go. But so many schools, they're they need to look outside, or they have a feeling that this is an important outside external thing that they need to do, because people like you and I and other people that are working as outside instructional coaching consultants, I think that's a big part of our role. We're coming in and we are not going to be there for forever. But how can we leave something behind in which we're instilling routines and a mindset and an approach to collaborating with each other and having these discussions, being more scientific about it, be more like thinking about instruction like it's the bee's knees, be more like a detective, right? And trying
Yeah.
to right trying to care about this a little bit more. This, I think, external consultants have a huge role to play. What do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I'm sending all my checks back that everybody I've worked with. No, the answer absolutely yes. In fact, I shared with you many times is that we didn't even want to work in a district unless an administrator was there with us the whole time, and or when coaches started being hired, an instructional coach was there with us all time, because we wanted to model what was going on. And the first few times we'd work with teachers, we just tell the administrator and the coach in our nicest, politest way, just sit down, shut up, and watch. Just see what's going on. We'll talk about all your questions after. And one of the things that we got a lot of mileage with that. But one of the things that was interesting that happened with administrators, but not with instructional coaches, was, let's say we did a coaching cycle with a teacher and the lesson just wasn't that good. And so we would have the debrief after. And my personal philosophy is, I don't care how bad the lesson sucked. I want this debrief to go in such a way so that you want to meet with me again. You're willing to meet with me again. But I'd be in the debriefs after a teacher, again, taught a lesson that didn't go so well. We say goodbye. And the principal would look at me and say, why didn't you tell him this? Why didn't you tell him that? That awful. That was awful. That was awful. I said, what good does that do? You think they're going to listen to me next time if I do that? So there is so much that we can share as the outside people, as schools are getting their coaching programs going, because even though coaching has been going on for, I don't know when the first book was written. I don't count anything in the last century. I'm going to count like from 2007 on. There just haven't been administrators that have gone through the system and have been instructional coaches and we're successful as instructional coaches versus becoming an instructional coach just to move up the administrative ladder. And so there are so many administrators that don't even know what's possible, in working with teachers, how much you can get out of the process, and how much the teachers will appreciate it. Everybody, not everybody, but God, you have to finesse it a little bit, for crying out loud. Everybody knows when the lesson didn't go well. You don't need to beat them up.
Well, what is it about? Is it what how we're trained to analyze and critique other things in life, like that? Like you go and take a college, novel study course, and what are we doing? We're trying to find out what's wrong. We're trying to show how smart we are when it comes to like I detected some argument in here, or something that nobody else in this room has thought of, which is a flaw in the author's thinking, and I can share it. Look at me, right? As you say, this is the part where I tell you how smart I am, right? It's some, or we watch the Olympics, and what do we see? We see these judges giving subjective ratings of dives and stuff. They're not talking about what was effective. They're trying to subtract points off of a 10-point scale, right? And something in our culture, something in our water has convinced leaders, I'm sure of this, Gene, has convinced leaders that your job is to go into an observation situation, come out into the debrief outside, and if you debrief it out loud with that person, list all the things that went wrong. And that is not the best starting point for a conversation with that teacher. It is, and we have to get rid of that.
Yeah.
External consultants like you and I who have been doing this, right, and have seen success in our own coaching and in coaching schools, I think that's the role we play. Of course, there's other schools that might try to do it internally, and they can do it, but they don't have that vision. And I think that vision is very important.
And I think the vision that everybody talks about is developing a coaching culture, developing a culture of professional relationships. And that is basically when I work with a with a school, I know I'm only going to be there once or twice, maybe meet teachers twice. And that's what I'm trying to model. I'm trying to model, and I tell them, no matter how the lesson went, the goal of this debrief is for the teacher to feel good when they walk out. So the next time you want to talk to them, they're open to it. In fact, my entire book, Maximizing the Impact of Coaching Cycles, is just about that first time you work with a teacher, that first coaching cycle. It's not a complete guide to everything you do as a coach, but it's so important to set that up so that you have an opportunity to influence later. Nobody influences, nobody makes a teacher better. I mean, maybe a little bit, after one meeting. The only time a teacher gets better after one meeting is that they're already real good and it's something tiny, or they're not very good at all, and you can give them one thing that impacts so much, that have leverage over the entire being in the classroom.
I mean,
So
and maybe we're sounding similar in how vague we are with like in that in like we're saying developing a coaching culture. What does that mean, and how do we get them to move forward, step by step? I just think maybe we need to communicate this better, that we're really, for me, it's narrowing it down to two things. That conversation is going to be productive if you do these things. And those two things are celebrating and spotlighting success in the lesson with the teacher, and not in a
yep.
gushy way, not in a woo, it was the best lesson I've ever seen. Literally, like more objective speak around, I saw this, I noticed this, it was effective when. And then the
Yeah.
second part, which is missing in more facilitative approaches, which is agreeing on a next step that builds off of that success you just mentioned. That is a tweak, a small, because think of the teacher's perspective. I've just been given praise. I've just been had my success spotlighted. And
Yeah.
then we both in dialogue discuss what could have gone a little bit better. And
Yeah.
I'm ready to go. great, right? I belong here. I have someone who's supporting me, who's
Yeah.
celebrating me, and I know I can get better by doing this one thing because I talked about it. I verbalized it myself with this person, you know?
I'm laughing because it's so common that Zach, man, that was a dynamite lesson. That was real effective. I just have a list of 10 things to go over with you too. I mean, it is just, and again, it stops building that coaching culture. And if you don't have individuals, if you haven't recruited individuals to this coaching culture, how can you do some of the other things that we talked about, where teachers are going to go into their colleagues' classrooms? Because there needs to be models, even for the teachers, of how they're going to give feedback. And if I've had a chance to work several times with an individual teacher, they know that they're not going to say what we just said. Oh, that was great, but here's 10 things that I would do differently. No, no, they would know better by then. And they know that it's going to support the culture of the, whether it's the professional culture, you want to call it a coaching culture, whatever it is, but where teachers are supporting one another.
Hey, we went off on a tangent just now. We've been talking about coaching again, but I think in terms of models, we've discussed kind of the everyone coaches model, the group coaching model, the teacher has one prep period. Unless I'm forgetting another important one, let's do kind of end with this one, which is there's only administrators. They have evaluation responsibilities. What are your thoughts on how ideal is this that they take on coaching responsibilities, and to what extent can they be successful if this is really the only thing, this is really the only way forward, is to give the coaching to the administrators? That's their responsibility.
My feeling is that it's so difficult for the administrator to do that, because they do have that evaluation component that they have to do. They have to, that's, and if you're a new teacher, maybe it's twice a year you come in, and it's very difficult for the teacher to separate when's an evaluative visit, when is a coaching visit. If I'm a coach and I'm working with Zach, a teacher, and we're brainstorming how to do something, and I'm the coach and I say, Zach, I have this idea. You may reject it, maybe not. But if if I'm brainstorming with the principal and the principal has this idea, oh, I'm just going to reject it. So there are principals who have told me that they have been successful coaches. And again, I'm looking at something, that I don't know where they get the time. Number one, because you could give some tips. You could give some tips. You could set them up with another teacher. We're going to have you go see this teacher. There are lots of things you can do, but I think there are some time-consuming things that you described earlier: modeling, providing other types of practice, other types of things that a principal just doesn't have time to do. And that's assuming that the teacher is willing to accept that person as a coach. Because you know what? It's not up to the principal to say, oh, you can't believe how effective I am. You should see my communication skills, my empathy, blah. It's not up to the principal. It's up to the person receiving that about how they're going to feel about it.
Yeah, I guess there's just some administrators tell me that they split up the staff between them and their vice principal. Half of my load of observations is evaluative, and I can say I am only in an evaluative capacity in these discussions. And then half of my load, I'm going to tell you again and again, I'm not your evaluator. That's the other guy.
Yeah.
I am in a coaching role. And perhaps that's how they get around it, or they get around these responsibilities of evaluation by in secret downplaying the evaluations significantly, which I completely recommend. I just think these evaluations are never going to lead to any changes and they're a huge waste of time. So I always try like, how can you do them quicker? How can you get AI to do some of it for you? Right?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
can you get through them so that you can focus on coaching? But yeah, it's tough. So I think we're kind of agreeing here. that sort of a combination of that full-time coaching role alongside some external coaching support, I think maybe that's for me, that's the full package. That's like if a school can do that, they're in a good they have a good baseline for a coaching program. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, yeah, I would absolutely agree. And again, as we didn't say it this way, but that outside consultant who comes in as a coach is the coach's coach and is the instructional coach for the principal. Not the principal's coach, they could have something else, but just that specialist with respect to instruction, so that when they go out and look in classrooms, they're seeing the same thing as their instructional coach.
Love it. So we talked about a bunch of different coaching models. If you've stuck with us this far, we're doing a series called Thinking Out Loud, where we talk about different things around leadership and instruction and coaching. Gene, it was so nice to have another one of these. I hope we keep doing them on a regular basis. Any last words?
Same, Zach. We'll schedule another one. And if anybody's interested in any topics, if you're an instructional coach, I'm sure they know how to get a hold of both of us on social media.
Perfect. Everyone, take care.
If you're enjoying these podcasts, tell a friend. Also, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can follow me on Blue Sky at gtavernetti, on Twitter, X, at gtavernetti, and you can learn more about me and the work I do at my website, tesscg.com. That's TESSCG.com, where you will also find information about ordering my books, Teach Fast, Focused, Adaptable, Structured Teaching, and maximizing the impact of coaching cycles. Talk to you soon.